Snake, the R&D team came up with something new.
What's this?
It's a cardboard tank. It's got enough room for 2 people. Same as any other cardboard box. Apparently the guy in front drives, and the guy in back is the gunner.
Hold on, Kaz. Who the hell came up with this thing?
I'm sorry, boss. He meant well, I swear. I know it's nowhere as good as a real tank, but still.
It's brilliant!
Huh?
The perfect synthesis of stealth and attack power. Compact, elegant design. The finest example of a weapon I've ever seen. Seriously, Kaz, I need to meet the guy who made this. I want to shake his hand.
You serious? Snake, look at it.
It's a masterpiece, in every sense of the word. You don't agree?
No,
What is that? A tank? I like it.
Pus?
I hate tanks, but this one I think I could get used to. I love that it's a zero-emissions vehicle. It will not hurt the forests of Costa Rica.
What?
Nice work, Kaz. I see I made the right choice making you second in command.
But is there something wrong with me? March 10th, 1945. 381,300 cluster bombs were dropped on Tokyo. Japanese houses at the time were almost all made of wood. In that single day, 1/3 of Tokyo burned to the ground. My mom lost her family and home in that raid. She had to move to Yokosuka and live with her cousin. The B-29s kept on coming, razing other major cities throughout Japan without mercy. Then, in August, they dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan surrendered to the United States at last. After that, Yokosuka was flooded with American soldiers come to occupy the country. My mother was still in her mid-teens, and she learned from her cousin how to survive in that town, by servicing the troops. That's how she met my father, and how I was born. My father was an officer serving with the government section of Allied GHQ under General Whitney. Whitney was known as MacArthur's shadow, and my father rode his coattails to a pretty high rank. While he was in Japan, he treated my mom like a wife. After he went back to the States, though, she never heard from him. I wasn't born until after he went back. My mom raised me as a single mother. She used the money my father left her to open a shop selling cigarettes and stuff to occupation troops. It was a decent living, but I didn't have citizenship. They're working to change the law now, but back then if your father was unknown, you couldn't get onto the Japanese family register. And in Japan, that means you can't be Japanese. So as I watched the American soldiers around town, I said to myself, I'm a son of America, the victor. My hair and eyes were different from the skinny, downtrodden Japanese around me. I told myself I'd leave this country someday and return to my true homeland. When I was around 10 years old, my mom fell ill, pretty much leaving me to run the shop in her place. One day I found a single picture of my father in the back of a drawer in the shop. I'd show it to the American soldiers who came into the store. A few years went by before one of them told me who he was. I know him, that's Miller. I started asking other guys, do you know where Miller is now? Can anybody tell me where Colonel Miller is now? Turns out he'd left the service and was making a living as an instructor for soldiers in Virginia. It was one of his students who finally told me that. I wrote him a letter in English. I'm your son. I want to go to the United States. Day after day I waited. Then just when I was about to give up, the post office delivered my future to the door. My father sent me some money. I thought my dream was going to come true. I was only thinking of myself. So I went to my bedridden mother and convinced her to let me go. My father arranged for a car to pick me up. It was jet black. When the neighborhood kids who'd always made fun of my hair saw it, their jaws practically hit the ground. I put my mom in a hospital and went on my own to America. When I met my father for the first time, he was living alone in a big house. He told me he'd lost his son, his American son, in Vietnam. He showed me a picture of my older brother. I guess that and his divorce left my father feeling lonely, which is probably why he finally took an interest in me. He'd retired from teaching. He was stooped over, could hardly walk, but he gave me 2 things: the name Miller and money for school. I used it to learn English and then go to college. America was exhausted from years of fighting in Vietnam. They were waging war in a foreign land, while at home, people were screaming for peace. Right after I graduated, I went back to Japan, alone. My father refused to see my mom. It was the first time I'd seen her in years, and she wouldn't even look at me. At first, I thought she was mad at me, but that wasn't it. Disease had taken her mind. A disease she got while she was young and desperate. She didn't even know who I was. I said, "Mom, it's me, Kazuhira." As I spoke, the sound of my own voice rang in my ears. Katsuhira, the name my mom gave me. It means peace in Japanese. I was Japanese. At least, I was the son of this tiny Japanese woman. It was then, for the first time, that I understood the reason, the emotion that inspired my mother to give me that name. She'd watched her hometown and family go up in flames. Her body and her mind were ravaged by war. And yet she chose to have a child named Peace, with a man who was once her enemy. Japan lost the war. But what good is war as a measure of a country? Since the war and up until the oil shock last year, Japan's economy has grown every single year. It's on its way to becoming a stronger country than ever. I stayed in Japan and joined the JSDF. I was 22 at the time. I did it to pay our bills. But it wasn't just that. I could have found work anywhere. And I knew it. And still, I couldn't think of anything else to do with myself. 2 years later, I didn't have to worry about Mom's hospital bills anymore. I left the JSDF and went back to the States. My father was already dead and buried. I was told he'd shot himself in the head. America crushed Japan, but it also crushed my father. My American dream was over. After that, I drifted around and, well, you know the rest. GHQ made women like my mother. It made Japan's peace constitution and the JSDF. And it made me. I was spawned by war, but I don't want to die in one. I won't die for a country, and I won't live like a pauper. I won't have my fate decided by some family register. So as long as I stick with you, boss, I've got a good feeling none of that will happen.
So tell me, Kaz, how's the self-defense force you were in different from an army?
The JSDF is set up for national defense. It's not configured for aggression against other countries. It's what you'd call exclusive defense.
Exclusive defense?
It's the fundamental strategic posture of the JSDF. No preemptive attacks. Only the minimum defensive action necessary after an enemy attacks.
Anything defined as self-defense, then?
The JSDF originated as the National Police Reserve. Back then, American forces stationed in Japan were being sent over to fight in the Korean War. So in a sense, the NPR was filling a gap.
Police, huh? Reminds me of the Costa Rican Civil Guard.
Yeah, exactly. They're also dispatched to provide disaster relief. The year before I joined, they had a hell of a time trying to rescue some buses that got hit by landslides.
So why'd you quit the JSDF?
Because I didn't have a reason to be in Japan anymore.
A reason?
My mom had died 3 years earlier, so I didn't have to care for her anymore. With her gone, there was no point hanging around in Japan.
Yeah, but a man with your talents could have risen pretty high in the ranks, I imagine.
I don't know what they made of me. Could be it actually alienated me from the brass. And personally, I could never get used to the idea of exclusive defense.
Meaning?
On a strategic level, I can see how a country could go with the exclusive defense model used by the JSDF, and I've got nothing against my fellow soldiers who believe in it. On a tactical level, though, it just rubbed me the wrong way. To put it simply, I was itching for a real fight.
I figured.
And I felt as long as I was in the JSDF, I'd never be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with my father, who was in the U.S. Army. Seeing Yukio Mishima's suicide didn't help either.
Yukio Mishima. The guy who wrote The Temple of the Golden Pavilion.
The way he questioned the status quo hit home with me. Not that I admired his vision or anything, but it did get me thinking, that's for sure. Life's funny sometimes, isn't it?
What brought that on?
We first met as enemies on the battlefield, and now here we are fighting side by side.
You mean Colombia?
Yeah. After I quit the JSDF, I made my way there and got myself a position as a drill sergeant for a band of revolutionaries, despite the fact that I'd never seen a day of combat.
I see you had the gift for talking business in Spanish even back then.
Oh, come on, stop it. You're making me blush. Unlucky for me, though, you were in the service of the Colombian Army. I remember it like it was yesterday. It all happened in an instant. You guys ambushed us, and half my unit was taken out. My mind went totally blank. I couldn't keep it together. My whole unit was wiped out, and I was left half dead from a bomb blast.
Then, as I was leaving, you yelled out at me. I came all the way from Japan to be here. My place is on the battlefield. Then you asked for my help, saying, I want to be the one to end it. I remember being surprised that there were still samurai in Japan.
You guys came over to me. I had a grenade hidden under me, but even then you were too fast. The second I pulled the pin, you grabbed the hand I was using to hold the grenade with both palms.
I didn't want it to go off. I'd heard samurai were a proud bunch. I wanted to know why one of them would stoop so low as to try to take his opponent with him.
And I said, I'll never lose again. We'll never lose again.
Yeah. We'll do whatever it takes, but we'll never be beaten again.
Then, I passed out from the blood loss. When I woke up, I was in your camp's infirmary, stuck full of tubes. Why'd you save me? Your enemy after I tried to kill you.
Because you swallowed your pride and fought with everything you had.
I just didn't want to lose.
You found a way to fight back, even in the face of death, even when you knew you were going to die. That's the mark of a true warrior. It's not about gain and loss, or victory and defeat. I looked at the way you lived your life and saw the path I needed to take as a warrior.
Wow, I never knew that. And that's why you...
I realized then that the battlefield doesn't only divide people into allies and enemies. Sometimes it tells you more than just who's an ally or who's an enemy. Sometimes it helps reveal your true comrades.
Like you and me, huh?
That's right. And 2 years later, here we are.